Welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. I'm your host, Tom Dutta. And hey, today we're live streaming. The show is across Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Give us a like or a subscribe to the YouTube channel or wherever you're watching this. We're live streaming, which means we're taping an interview today with a guest that I'll be bringing on in a moment. This show will be produced as an international podcast, and a video premiere will be releasing in the near future. So make sure you check us out and subscribe. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the guest, our guest, before we bring her on. She's in the green room. Just going to pull up my notes here and read a few things to you. Her name's Zeona McIntyre. She's a co-author of a new book. She'll tell us about that. And she went from $50,000 in debt to being financially free in 2 years with a blank. I won't tell you that secret. She'll share that with us. And she's, for 10 years, she's been managing short-term rentals across the globe. She transitioned into selling real estate and a lot more things that she's done. We'll put that all in the show notes. One of the things you want to note is her story. I asked her why, what's her challenge? What was the challenge in getting to this point in her life and making it as purposeful as it is? And she wrote me this. I'm just going to read it out. My hero's journey started when my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And then she passed away 2 years later. I was 28. I lost my sole provider parent. This was right around the same time that I found blank, she'll fill that in, as a side hustle, which was leading me into a life of financial independence. And now she feels strongly about teaching others what she's learned, and she's going to tell us more about that story. So I'm going to bring her into the studio right now. Welcome, Zeona McIntyre.
Thank you for having me.
All right, it's a pleasure. Hey, what part of the world are you in today?
I'm in Boulder, Colorado, where I live, but I am rarely here. So it is a surprise, a nice time to be home.
So I'm glad I asked that because I'm just going to full screen you. I was just looking at this here. I thought, I wonder which one of those real estate places that you're in, but it's good to be home. So yeah, that we're all about the story of success, and so when I found your bio, you gave that to me. It talked about all these great things that you'd done and how you changed your life into something quite frankly fascinating. But let's go back to the hard part. I know it's harder to talk about it, and I honor you for sharing that. Tell us about your early years, and then up to that moment where life changed because of that situation.
Yeah, so growing up, I grew up in Hawaii, and my parents were always struggling. They just never quite figured out money. And I think it wasn't until a bit later, maybe middle school or so, that I started to look around and go, is everyone struggling? Is life this hard for everyone? Doesn't feel like it should be. And I started to notice that it didn't seem like it was.
Yeah.
And so it became really important to me to figure out how I could do money differently than my parents. And that's kind of been a quest for my whole life, something I'm still working on.
Yeah, I just want to jump in for a moment and ask you to expand on that. So when we say our parents were struggling, my parents had different kinds of struggles. My father was a military commanding officer, and he unfortunately became a bad alcoholic. And age 12, I became sort of homeless. My mom, sort of had to raise 3 boys on her own. So she had financial struggles. There was emotional struggles. When you say your parents were struggling, help us see that picture. What specifically did that look like through the eyes of a young child?
Yeah. So, gosh, we have a pretty similar story. My dad was drug addled. He wasn't into alcohol, but he did just kind of want to escape and not really want to be responsible. And so he did a lot of drugs, and it just ended up being that sometimes he could show up and provide, and sometimes he couldn't. And so it left my mom to be kind of a single mom of 2. And so for most of what she did, she was just kind of scrappy, and she was cleaning houses. Eventually, she got a more steady job of being a massage therapist, but it was always really hard. And I think the thing that also made it hard is that they had no understanding of what to do when you do have money. So there was
Yeah.
no investing, there was barely any saving. It was just all going right out the door.
Wow. And you got me excited about Hawaii. I mean, many people have or haven't been there. What island, first of all, and what was it like staying focused on life when you're in a beautiful paradise?
Yeah, so I grew up in Maui, and I think people just don't know this about the islands, but there is a lot of poverty there. They people just see like the shiny luxury hotels and resorts and all of that stuff. But the people that tend to live and contribute to the island, they work at restaurants or they're cleaning ladies or something like that. And so there is a lot of poverty there.
Yeah, it's amazing. And you mentioned two. You have a sister or brother uh, growing up with. Was it
I
a
have a
brother?
sister. Yeah,
I
she's
see.
still out there with her kids now.
Yeah, and just as we transition through the early years, I'm so sorry your mother passed away. Is your
Yeah.
father still alive?
He's also passed.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And how old were you when he left?
He passed away 3 years, almost to the day that my mother passed away. So,
Yeah,
yeah, it was pretty quickly thereafter.
yeah. I want to talk a little bit about that chapter. So you were 28, and your mother was a couple years, right? That she went through that journey, right, with cancer.
Yeah.
Tell us
Yeah.
how do you navigate that? Take us back into that time. There's a lot of stress and things, but there's obviously sort of part that shaped your life. What was it like? What did you do to survive through that?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's just a lot of denial. Like, I remember her telling me about it, and I just didn't think that it would happen, that she would pass away. I thought, will just get past this. My mom was like super healthy. We grew up, I'm vegetarian. And so we've always just been really health conscious. And I just didn't think that could happen to us. But now I feel like cancer has a bunch of other layers. It can be emotional, it can be, sickness can happen different ways in the system. But I didn't realize this until I started writing my book, but the time that my mother was diagnosed was almost exactly the same time frame of when I started to do Airbnb. And so it was almost as if as my mom was starting to leave me, which she wasn't really supporting me at that point. I was a student and I had a job and I was doing my own thing, but she was still like my best friend. We talked every day. So it was a big loss for me.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I know each time you go through it, it's emotional.
Yeah. It's good. It's healthy, but it's still sad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everybody, we'll let Zeona catch her breath there. It's a teaching moment. Each time we tell our story about something painful, we relive it. I want to just honor you and say I love your story and what you've shared, because it frees other people when they hear somebody with courage to tell that story, and even to understand years later how much pain that still causes you. I always like to say that when somebody goes through a tragedy, they become stronger. So if you're okay to continue,
Sure.
what did that give you in terms of strength when you look back now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it gave me a lot of perspective about life
Yeah,
because I think at a young age, a lot of people don't deal with mortality. They just think that they're living forever, kind of. It's like we know we're going to die, but it feels really far away. And I think it just helped me organize myself and seeing, like, hey, I actually really want to be financially independent. I want to have the space to do whatever I want with whomever I want, whenever I want. And so I just kind of got that life is short
yeah.
idea. It just hit home. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody come back and watch this part of the show. I like that. I'm gonna have to put it in the show notes. Do what I want, wherever I want, how I want. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that could be a title of another book. You just painted a vision there about. I think a lot of us have that imposter syndrome when we look at what we maybe are doing, and maybe there's a part of what you just said. That's a dream that everybody listening and watching to this is going to connect to. You sound like you were the well, say quiet warrior through that chapter with your mom. Your sister, was she around at the time too, or close, or was it mainly you sort of driving that?
Yeah. So I was already living in Colorado and my sister was in Hawaii at the time, and my mom was living with me for part of it, and then she went to Puerto Rico for some treatment, and they came back and lived with me at the end. And I think it was just that I was the older
Yeah.
child, and so it was just easier for me to kind of take charge. But I thought about this so much later, and I was like, I can't imagine how it was for my sister, because she's only 6 years. She's 6 years younger than me, which is a big gap. And that means she was only like 20. Well, now I'm having a hard time doing math. 22? Was she 22? Holy cow. I mean, that I thought it was hard for me to lose my mom at 28, but 22 is incredibly young.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's just something I guess we haven't talked about a ton.
Yeah, we'll move on in a minute, but I'm fascinated by
Sure.
this part. You talked about how things can change in a moment, right? It was almost like this aha moment. You know, your mom's healthy, and she couldn't. There's no way that this could be my mom, and then things are happening, and she's gone. And in doing some of the research for this show, if you came across my story, I was doing the ride. This is why we say there's threads in everybody's stories, and why we connect. That in 2018 August, I was doing the Ride to Conquer Cancer, and I was raising funds for 4 people that had passed from cancer, people in my family and community. And my dad had just died. I was estranged from him for 22 years, but he passed away in January that year. So I thought, I'm going to go do something crazy that I've never done before. A buddy of mine said, hey, you want to ride for cancer? And I said, why? And he said, well, my daughter, he's an engineer actually in one of our large engineering firms. I'm up here in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And I said, Roger, what's the story? He said, my daughter passed away from leukemia at age 11. And so I said, I'm in. And Zeona, I never had a bicycle. The last time I rode was when I was a kid, and I remember the training wheels coming off my bike. And here I am signing up for a 225 kilometer bike ride over 2 days. That'd be like 150 miles in your place. And so let me get to the point of the story. So I woke up and I trained for 3 months. I did my first century ride, which is 100 kilometers, and I could barely dismount off the bike. Every muscle was just in torturous. It was hot. There were fires burning, so there's a lot of smoke that year. And it was about 35 Celsius, which was almost 100. So I thought, wow, I'm in great shape. I get to the first leg of the ride. I finish 125K. I'm feeling great. And my wife's with me, and we stay in a motel with some of the riders. I stepped in the bathtub to have a shower, and literally within milliseconds, I slipped backwards. I'm 185 pounds, and I broke the fall of my head. I literally cracked the tub with my head. I blacked out, and I sustained a serious brain injury. And in fact, what we know now is if I had fallen another centimeter one way, I might not be here. I have permanent impaired vision. I wear these funny glasses, which I took off to respect this show. So I can't deal with light. I have double vision. My eyes don't converge from side to side. And as a C-level executive and then a business owner for the last 10 years, my life just stopped. And I sunk into depression, suicidal ideation, all those things that come with it. I'm through much of that now, but I have permanent disabilities and things. So that's why your story touched me, because it's the threat of, I remember my wife said, and I'll finish on this so I can give it back to you. My wife said, you're not going to ride. And at the time I fell, I didn't know I was what the injury was. And my wife said that, and I slept in the bed in the motel with my head leaning against the backboard all night in excruciating pain. And I thought I just rung my bell and got a headache. She said, you're not going to ride. So I said, this is what I said. And I never forget it. I said, people who have cancer don't have a choice. So I said, I'm going to finish. And she gave me a bag of Tylenol, and I rode the next 125 kilometers, literally just my head down. I came in across the line last. And then I said, just put me in the car, take me home. And the rest was, we went from there. So I want to say thanks to you for sharing the cancer story, but it's also teaching us that life can change in a moment. So what do you do?
Yeah.
So let's get into the next chapter of your story, which is fascinating. I know you don't have the physical book. Tell us about the title of the book and why you wrote it, and then about the 50,000 in debt. What was that from? And then you came through it with this remarkable story.
Yeah, so the book is called 30-Day Stay, A Real Estate Investor's Guide to Mastering the Medium-Term Rental. And that is, I mean, it sounds really niche if people are not in real estate. But my journey started with short-term rentals and then has morphed over the last 10 years of doing short-term rentals into the space of 30 days or more, which is a medium-term rental space. And that tends to be serving the nurse population, some military, different segments of our community.
Yeah.
But I find it to be just a really great strategy for people to start with that are new into real estate and want to have some cash flow in their lives, some alternative income, because a lot of people don't necessarily want to retire, but they just want to have some space to really live their life on
Sure.
their own terms.
Help us understand what you said short-term rental. So let's assume most people aren't in this space. Short-term rental, and then you wrote it in your story. It talks about going from 50,000 in debt to debt-free. Why did you choose this? Was that the side hustle you were doing, and then Airbnb? Like, fill in some of those blanks.
Yeah, so a short-term rental is just basically a vacation rental. It's anything that's rented under 30 days. And
Yeah,
usually when people do vacation rentals, it's like 3 or 4 nights, you know. Um, why? So the story for the 50K, that was student debt. And a lot of people, I think these days have 100K, 200K in
totally.
student debt. So it's a huge burden on a lot of people. But I was able to, with Airbnb in combination with kind of frugal tactics from the FIRE community, which is financial independence, retire early. There's a whole community of people that are trying to get out of debt and retire early. So using the combination of both, I was able to just be really smart with my money, invest it well, and then start to buy real estate. And so, yeah, that was something that came into my life at 26. And by the time I was 28, I could just not work and it was supporting me. And so when my mom needed to be supported, like I took care of her the last 3 months of her life, I
Yeah.
could take her to all her appointments and drive her around because she just wasn't capable for that.
I mean, that's just awesome. We if we had fireworks or something, we'd put it on the screen now to celebrate what you just said. Because, well, actually, I'm just going to do that. Here we go. There we go. There's some fireworks for you.
Amazing.
Congratulations. So I'm just going to riff on this. That's what I do. That we didn't pre-script the interview. I never do that. So going into your journey, because I see pictures, and I'm now 26, and you've got the chapter evolving with your mom. Then the student debt was there, and then you looked out after your mom, and then that passed behind you. But this thing about investing in buying, tell us about, like, I'm starting to get the picture here, but you buy these properties, or, I mean, just fill in. If I was learning from you now in your book, what are the first few steps to doing it?
So what I like about using Airbnb is it can be kind of like real estate training wheels. And so what worked really well for me is that when I started, I was just renting out a room in a 2-bedroom apartment that I was renting. So people call that rental arbitrage now. You can kind of rent and re-rent places. And so it started very small, where it was just a separate bedroom, and then eventually it could be the whole place. And then what happened is that I could finally afford to buy a place. And so what worked really well is that I could see all the numbers. So just an example is I had a 1-bedroom apartment that I had been renting out for about a year and a half on Airbnb. And I was paying about $1,100 in rent a month on that. And so then I was able to bring in income, and it's seasonal. So it was between $1,700 and $4,000 a month. And so when I went to go buy my first property, it was just like 5 minutes down the road, but my mortgage after HOA and everything was only $950 a month. And so I knew it would make the same amount.
Yeah.
And so it gave me this kind of confidence that a lot of people buying their first property don't have, because it's scary. They don't know if it's really going to work the way that they hope. And
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I had already had that experience, and it made it a lot easier for me to take the step.
That's awesome. I'm assuming in the book you cover all this. I mean, is it sort
Absolutely.
of like so for the sake of the audience, we're an international audience. Everybody we're here today is Zeona McIntyre, who is a co-author of a book. What was the title again?
30
30-day
day stay.
The Investor's Guide to Mastering the Medium-Term Rental. And so it sounds like, so we're at work. I'm in Canada. You're in the U.S. We've got international listeners that'll be listening to this. HOA, I assume, are closing costs on a.
HOA is a homeowners association.
Okay, gotcha. So basically, what I heard you say is you rented an Airbnb, and then just for those dummies like me, Airbnb, I've never really used that, but I think it's an online app or something, or somewhere you go to find short-term rentals, rooms and things like that.
Yeah. Instead of a hotel, you're just basically staying in other people's homes.
So you did that, and then you re-rented out a part of the 2-bedroom that you were staying in. And can you do that? Is that okay to do now? There's sometimes people have been talking about that.
You can do it with the owner's permission.
Okay. So you would get your owner's permission, and then you did that, and you started to see the cash flow growing. And then down the street, I'm assuming you bought an apartment, would it be?
Yeah, I bought just a 1-bedroom condo.
That's awesome. And so you bought your 1-bedroom condo. Do you mind telling us what you bought it for, the price, just roughly?
Yeah. So I bought it for $162,000 US dollars. And I was very fortunate that at that year, we just had a huge amount of appreciation. So that was 2014. And just like a couple months after buying it, it went up $100,000 in value. And so, that's the power of real estate, is that you have to be in the game to get those big wins, but they do happen. As we saw, since COVID, there was a lot of appreciation that went around.
Yeah. And I'm assuming you have in the book some advice on perspective on, the current reality is difficult. People are nervous because those quick increases, some of it, especially in Canada, when we look, were artificial increases. And, all my friends, I'm formerly from the banking industry as a lender, so I get the long-term thing. You stay, if you're in it to get out of it, you're going to lose. And now there's interest rates that have gone up significantly in the U.S. Here, and there's other factors, right, like the war and things like that. So what's really interesting is when the bank approved you for your first mortgage, did they were they comfortable using the income that you had from the Airbnb? Is that primarily what was part of the numbers?
So that's a great question. I actually couldn't get a loan from a bank. I knew that going into it, that back in 2012, Airbnb income was just not counted. Nowadays, you can go to the bank and they'll see 2 years of Airbnb income on your taxes and they will take it. But back then, I went to a former landlord of mine, and I knew that he was a real estate investor, and I just asked him for a loan.
Awesome.
And he said yes.
Yeah. Again, the resilience of you, and more fireworks here. I really believe this, and I do a lot of studying. I'm working on a bit of a project now for a PhD on brain science because of my own injury. That the way the brain develops its ability to be resilient and all, a lot of it comes through. Like even from what you said about your lifeline story, you seem to be somebody who just can push through obstacles and find solutions. Not everybody can do that. That's why I think people need to get your book, read it, and use it as a reference. And by the way, everybody, I'm an author as well. Author's work only gets known if you buy the book, if you read it and post a review on Amazon, goodreads.com. So I'm asking you now, plug the book again. Just tell us the title.
Yeah.
Zeona?
Yep. So it's 30-day stay, the Investor's Guide to Mastering the Medium-Term Rental. You can find it on Bigger Pockets. We're in kind of pre-order days. So biggerpockets.com/30-day stay. And if you want 10% off, just use my first name, Zeona, as the code.
Zeona. I keep calling you Zeona. Sorry.
You're fine. I don't correct people. I find that it's just always said a little bit different.
That's all right. You're talking to somebody who gets called Tom Duda all the time, or I always think it's Tom Duda like butter. All right.
I like that.
Yeah. One of my passions is cooking. So let's get back. I'm fascinated by this. So the 50,000, you got my heart again. Again, everybody, what I've always said, Zeona, is the stories you tell. Like already you're touching on things that are real. I've got a daughter who's 24 in engineering school across the country, and her student debt's piling up. And I just had a fellow on my show. In fact, you can look it up and listen to it. You might be interested. he does scholarships. He's a philanthropist. He's I think he made money fairly well when he was a executive, but he had wrote a book on student debt, and it's like an epidemic, not just the U.S. here. And I know there's some political stuff going on right now in your pre-elections about forgiving student debt, and they've passed a bill and creating some issues of unfairness. The whole thing is just terrible, right? If you, I don't know, you said you went to in Hawaii. I don't know what it's like there for education, but most people don't realize. I'd like to know what you think of this. That most of the world lives on $2 a day, and most people in the world don't have access to education. And then I can't remember the country. I think it was a bit of a dictator, the dictator running it. But in that country, healthcare and education were free for everybody. Imagine that. Yeah. And I really believe, and I'm so sorry you went through that there's so many people coming through with education debt that they'll never be able to buy a home. They'll never be able to get ahead because they always have that, over their head. So the 50,000, I know you paid it off. Was that all from the Airbnb model, from the real estate income model?
Yeah, it was just through cash flow and making the money each month.
Amazing. Yeah. How long did that take? How many years, or was it?
It took 2 years. That's
incredible. Like, that's why this book has to be, I know when you get them, I want you to sign one so I can put it in my studio here. This goes back to something you said earlier, which I think was another teaching moment about your parents struggling with money. And by the way, you're not the only one. I think every family lets you come from a well-to-do family. My mom used to clean classrooms in schools at night and leave the boys, and my dad was spending all the money drinking it away. And it's like, but that's the thing I remember was my parents weren't taught how to save or what to do.
Yeah, exactly.
So give us a couple nuggets on that, because obviously you do know what you're doing, having gone into business, paid off 50,000 in 2 years. But teach us what's a strategy? What should people do if they have a bit of money here and there?
Yeah, so I don't think real estate's for everyone, but real estate can be a huge tool in creating wealth over time. So what they teach in the financial independence community is just to invest in index funds. So you can go somewhere like Vanguard, and we recommend VTSAX. So it's just a certain fund that you can invest in that is following the entire market. So like this is US specific, but like the S&P 500 is 500 of the top companies. And so you can buy a fund like that where, when it's that many companies, some go up, some go down, but generally you're just following the trend of the market. And so the VTSAX is actually the total stock market index. So it's every company that is being publicly traded. You just have a small bit of it. So that's a very safe fund. And so it's just better to be investing your money than having it, sitting under a mattress or in your bank account. But yeah, if you look,
I was just sorry, I got a dark sense of humor. We're talking about Airbnb and the mattress. I just somehow that made me laugh.
Yeah,
you got your personal vault in every unit.
You could do that, I guess. But yeah, with real estate, what's great is that it can pay for itself. And so that's like a really important piece, because people spend 35 to 50% of their income on housing. And so it's a huge expense. And if you can find a way to live for free by utilizing either renting part of your house out or doing Airbnb, that cuts down your expenses tremendously. So that's kind of what allowed me to retire quickly.
Sure, and you mentioned in the bio information about a co-author. We don't need to talk about them in detail because I'd rather if they were here. But why? Who is that? Why did you write the book with that person? What was their part in that?
Yeah, so Sarah Weaver, we became friends last year, and I had heard from her that she had ghost written a book. So ghostwriting means that you don't get credit, but you write the book for somebody else, maybe in tandem or just completely on your own. And I had wanted to write a book for a few years. I had kind of tried and failed. And I think for me, I just felt like I don't know if I could do it on my own. And so when I had this idea and knew that she had done it, I offered her the opportunity to do it with me. And so we did. And she's also a real estate investor and has grown a lot in the last year. So yeah, I have 12 units that I own. She owns 19, and we do this medium-term rental strategy. But what's great in the book is we use a lot of storytelling to teach,
Yeah,
because I think in how-to books they can get really dry. And so there's
absolutely.
lots of fun stories in it.
Well, I'm glad you said that because I'm all about storytelling. That's we're wired. Our brains are wired, like you said so well, to remember stories. And wow, the portfolio you have is nice. Is it a lot to look after? Yeah, you hear nightmare stories. My brother-in-law has a bunch of. They're not Airbnb, but I guess making sure you have the right tenants and you have all that covered in the book, right? So that you
Mhm.
don't, you don't have. It's hard to evict a tenant, right?
Yeah, I've never had to evict a tenant.
Yeah,
So when you have furnished rentals, a lot of times people are only there for a contract period. So a business person is coming in for a 3-month contract, or a nurse. They usually have an exit. They're going to the next contract. They're
I
going
see.
back home or whatever. So it can happen, but it hasn't
Yeah.
happened to me. And there's ways to protect yourself. Yeah.
And so you cover that in the book, I'm sure. And what about pre-screening for, is it a long process if I wanted to rent one of your things? How do you know I'm good and worthy?
Yeah. Yeah, so it depends what avenue you're coming through. If you're coming through Airbnb, we all have profiles on Airbnb with reviews that you can't alter. And so they do like government ID verification and making sure you're who you say you are. And so that's kind of like community vetted. But then if you're off of a third party site, like if you found somebody just on Craigslist or Facebook, you would want to, you know, filter them a little bit better than that. And so there's ways to do like a background check or a criminal check, eviction check. So all of that's very, very quick. You just
Yeah,
put their info into a thing and it spits it out.
that's awesome. Where, if people wanted to find your properties, where would we go to find that? Is a website or
Yeah.
something?
That's interesting. I feel like I'm revamping my website right now. So on my website, zeonamcintyre.com, I
Yeah.
might have them, but I'm not sure if we have updated that yet.
Okay.
So you could
Well,
reach out to me. Happy to share.
yeah, we'll put it in the show notes, ZeonaMcIntyre.com, which is
Great.
awesome. So there was something fun that I read somewhere about, your hobby. It turned into some kind of a hobby or some kind involving four-legged or some kind of I don't know, tell us.
Sure. Sure. So there's this huge trend in real estate called house hacking. So it's how
Yeah.
people figure out how to live for free. Some people do it by having a bunch of roommates. Some people do it by renting out part of their home, maybe, an additional unit or a basement or something. The one thing that we do is that we have to live in our house at least 6 months out of the year to be considered owner occupied and a resident of our town.
Yeah.
But after that, we can rent it out the other 6 months. And so to do that, we use pet sitting. So there's an app called Trusted House Sitters, and it's very popular in Canada. So if people are interested, go check it out. And I'm happy to put a code in here for people for a discount. But Trusted House Sitters, you go and you stay at people's houses for free, and you watch their pets. And so what we do is we rent our home out on Airbnb for 200, 300 a night. And so we're not exactly working for free, we're getting paid, but by our house. And so that allows us to pay our entire mortgage and then some by pet sitting.
That's more cool stuff coming out here. I like that whole idea. Wow, amazing! I just put a stock ticker on the screen there with the two
I love
websites
it.
we've been talking about, everybody. So you can, that'll be in the show production. Give us a crazy story or one of your most exciting or heartwarming, whatever you want, story about the pet sitting.
Oh, how funny. I don't think it's too crazy because, we're just staying in people's homes and being with their animals. But I think one story that was really heartwarming that happened to us recently is that we've had a connection with an animal and some friends that owned this animal for a while. We've kind of been with this dog maybe like 4 or 5 times. And my partner is from France, and he had had a few bad experiences with pets and when he was younger. So dogs there, I guess, are just not as well trained, and he'd maybe gotten attacked or scared. So he just sort of had this idea that he was a cat person and not a dog person. And it wasn't until he met this dog, his name is Kaipo, um, that was a huge mix, some kind of like pit bull terrier mix. That he at first was really intimidated by this dog, and then realized that he was just the sweetest, warm dog, and they fell in love, and it was his, favorite dog crush
Oh,
of all time. But we stayed with him, I think about 3 weeks ago, towards the end of his life, and so this dog had liver cancer, and we got to be with him kind of at the very end. And
yeah.
so while we were in Hawaii, once the family came back, we stayed another 2 weeks at another pet sit. And I left before my partner. But when my partner came back around and saw the dog on his last day, it ended up being actually the day that they ended up putting him down. And so he
Oh,
got to be there for the last few weeks of his life and actually see him on that day. So it was really sweet.
yeah. What a heartwarming story. It's like a movie, the rise and then the emotional. It brings me back because I had a 16-year-old miniature Shih Tzu, Shadow, and she passed away. I think it was a couple of years ago. We've had her since my daughter was very young, and I didn't realize how much I was connected to that dog. In fact, in my studio here, she would always be sitting at my feet, and she's gone now. But I went through that whole experience of putting. I've never done that before. When I was a kid, we had a couple dogs. One had cancer, unfortunately. But Zeona, I remember sitting in my chair. I took pictures of it. Might do a show on it about the emotional connection and what a pet brings in terms of mental health for people. But I had to go and do that thing of putting her down and just feeling the life come out of her body as she was gone was just really unbelievable. You're a partner that sounds like a great guy. Thanks for sharing that story. So I want to just ask you one more question as we move to the end here. And that was so everybody, what we've seen here is a journey of Zeona finding this purpose. And I think they say things we tend to get to a point in our life where we just have pain or we have a situation and we want to change it. And so yours was coming through, $50,000 in student debt and, the family situation that you navigated through, and you just became resilient and found a way to create a business on your own. Way to go, because I think the stats are over 90% of small businesses fail. So you have to fail your way to success. You found this model, you did it, and I'm sure in the book there's some learnings, bumps along the way. You paid off $50,000 in debt in 2 years, which is remarkable. And then now you're pet sitting and having fun. Last question is really diversification. So what keeps you busy besides pet sitting? And are you trying to diversify and do something else, or what's the next 5 years for you? Or are you just enjoying life and saying, I'm where I want to be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think writing a book was one of these big things that I always wanted to do in my life.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to stay present with this during this time of like sending it out in the world and sharing it with people, because I know that, they have a shelf life. A book is only going to be relevant for so long, right? So I'm wanting to try to be present in it and not plan too far ahead. But I would love to work more in media and have my next dream is to have a TV show around real estate and teaching people. So I'm hoping that comes together somehow. I'm in the manifesting stage of that.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Another word, manifesting. There's a saying, everything in life is created twice, once in thought, second in the physical equivalent. And people hear that word manifesting and I think it's like, ooh, but here's proof. Zeona takes an idea and manifests it, puts it into, creates it. We can talk, we'll have you back again when you get that dream off the ground. I'm a film radio producer. You can hook up and pick my brain too. I do a lot of production work. And, I've got a feature film that actually is my book, which I'm not going to do a commercial on your show. My book's being made into a feature film. So
amazing. Congratulations. Fireworks for you.
Thank you. I guess the other thing I want to honor you and I want people to see is you said something really important about you were afraid to do a book. And everybody, that's one of the things that see in Zeona that's remarkable to me is you fear. They say do it afraid. You fear things, but you did it. And we'll have you back to see how the book's done for you. But I just want to give you some inspiration here that when I wrote my book, it was published in 2017, I had no idea what to do with it, how, and the things that have come through that book have been totally unexpected. And I think you're going to find that thing I like about you is you're humble. And one of the lessons I'll share with you is that my book wasn't written for money or fame. I wanted to know that each time somebody read it, if one person, if it gave them hope, changed their life, gave them an idea to move a dream forward or move in a direction, then my book's in my mind, a bestseller. And so so when you get your copies, I'm going to hold you accountable to getting me a copy signed. I'll be happy to do a review and post it on for you. Maybe we'll do a book swap review. Check out mine, and we can have you back again, maybe with your co-author one day. So we're going to do something here to honor you. I just want to full screen me for a minute. Just stay there. So you see that crest on the back there on the TV screen? Mm-hmm. All right. Do you know what that is? Well, probably unfair question. It's actually about this big. It's called a challenge coin. And challenge coins started in World War II, and they were basically carried by soldiers in their pockets to commit community to each other. And so they had fun. If you didn't have yours, you bought drinks or dinner. Today, they're around the world. First responders have them. My dad was in AA, Alcohol Anonymous. They have their own version of a coin. When I started the show, I said I want to bring leaders on who have backstories of inspiration that not only overcame, but did something with it to be purposeful to others. And I created that as the show award. So you are going to be receiving the Quiet Warrior Show coin. The front, it's hand-painted, crafted, minted in the U.S. The front's the show, but the back is actually the fully illustrated Hero's Journey narrative by Joseph Campbell, who actually left us a library or university of his knowledge about storytelling. So you'll be receiving that, and today we officially induct you into the Quiet Warrior community. There's less than 40 of these go out a year, and we now have these in 19 countries. So welcome.
Great. Thank you.
All right. And I will just read a few words here. I write these down as you're speaking. They're not scripted. These are leadership words. The first one is wisdom. They say that the difference between knowledge and wisdom is time. For somebody as young as you to have such wisdom, I think it's awesome. The second one is, I coined from you what you said, fire. I mean, you're on fire with what you've done, but you can light a fire under people with hope. A third one is love. I mean, that moment, and thank you again for honoring your mom. What was your mom's name?
Syra,
beautiful name. We'll dedicate the show to her. She's an unsung hero, but sharing that with us and being vulnerable, that's powerful. And then the final one is authority. So when you become an author, it's in the word authority. You become an authority on something. So I want you to just always remember that you're awesome and you're now an authority on this topic of yours. And, I think your life will be limitless. So thank you for coming on the show. All right, everybody, find that true purpose. Live life with passion like you see Zeona do, and live the life that you deserve and desire.
Thank you for listening to The Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca